So the Stop Killing Games movement reached over 1 million signatures last week. That said, I would suggest that all of you in the EU still sign, because there is a very big possibility that a lot of these signatures will be spoofed. So before I continue, just remember, if you still haven't signed it, if you are a European, go do so. Don't sign it if you're not in the EU. Anyway, despite the success of the initiative so far, there has been some resistance, and I know some of you probably want me to talk about pirate software, but I think let's, shift the focus to something else here, and that is Video Games Europe that has responded to the initiative. And Video Games Europe is essentially a lobby group comprised of a lot of the publishers that are doing this, always online crap. So they've responded, and I'm gonna go through each of their points in their official statement and put my take on this. And now Ross Scott has already responded to this with his own video that is really good. And we're going to go through some of the comments in his comment section later on. But for now, I'm just going to read their points to you, and we'll go over them. So Video Games Europe says this: the decision to discontinue online services is multifaceted, never taken lightly, and must be an option for companies when an online experience is no longer commercially viable. Look, I get that keeping servers alive costs money. Nobody here thinks that it's effortless or free. But multifaceted is just a fancy way of saying that they want to be able to shut down services whenever they feel like they need to, or when they feel like it's no longer worth the effort. Even if you paid full price. Imagine that you buy a car, for example, and years down the line, it turns out that the spare parts are just way too expensive. And so the car company that you bought the car from, they send a tow truck to take your car away. That's basically what happens when games get shut down with no alternative. Because the thing that you thought you owned was actually a time-limited rental. Neverwinter Nights included dedicated server software right on the disk in 2002. Command & Conquer later got open-sourced engine code so people could run it forever. Even these older examples prove there are ways to let players keep access if you care enough to bother. Ubisoft, who helped draft this statement, are the ones who pulled the crew completely. Not only the multiplayer portion, but literally everything. Even the single-player mode stopped working because you have to sign in to proceed to the single player portion. And so this was an active choice on their part. What I'm trying to say here is that companies have options. Some just prefer to pretend that the conversation just ends whenever it gets too complicated. The next part is, we understand it can be disappointing for players, but when it does happen, the industry ensures players are given fair notice and compliance with the local consumer protection laws. Sure, giving people a warning before you shut something down is better than just shutting it down overnight. But a countdown doesn't fix the inherent problem in of itself, right? Telling someone, hey, in 30 days we're going to make something completely unplayable doesn't feel like any real consolation. It's like if you bought a movie and the studio said, by the way, this disc will self-destruct next month. Just wanted to let you know. You're still losing what you paid for, even if you do get an email about it before. Giving notice is the bare minimum, but it doesn't make the practice of killing a purchased product any easier to swallow. Alright, so next part is, private servers are not always a viable alternative option for players, as the protections we put in place to secure players' data, remove illegal content, and combat unsafe community content would not exist and would leave rights holders liable. Now, I've heard this argument a lot, and it sounds convincing up until you realize just how many games actually allow players to run their own servers without the sky falling down all of a sudden. So Minecraft is probably the biggest example here, with millions of private servers running with no expectations that Mojang is liable for every piece of content people upload. We have Valheim, Rust, Ark, and all of them rely on player-hosted servers, and none of these companies are dragged into court over what players do on them. If the concern is data security, then you don't have to bundle private servers with personal information. You can strip out anything sensitive and just release the binaries or just tools so you can host matches. And you know, what's funny is that whenever publishers says that they would be on the hook for unsafe content, they're completely ignoring that disclaimers and user agreements exist for a reason. Like Bethesda's Fallout 76 has private worlds with mods and community content, and the publisher doesn't stand behind every single mod someone installs. Like, this isn't about whether private servers are technically possible or legally catastrophic. They work fine across tons of games. It simply comes down to whether a company wants to let players keep the game that they already bought. Alright, so the next part is many titles are designed from the ground up to be online only. In effect, these proposals would curtail developer choice by making these video games prohibitively expensive to create. Again, like if you are designing a video game that has an expiry date, you are essentially creating a rental service. Like, it's fine if you are very upfront about it, but most of the time it's actually just marketed as any product you've ever owned. Destiny has always online elements, but Bungie, it's clear that it's a live service that evolves and eventually moves on. Like, nobody here is saying that publishers can't keep making live service games, and that is not what the initiative is about. But if you go that route, you have to responsibly tell your consumers that this is what it is. It has to be upfront and center before people buy it. And ideally, you give them options to keep playing after support ends. Again, this is not about forcing live service games to be turned into single-player games or anything like that. It's simply about basic respect for ownership. Like, if your business model depends on wiping away entire experiences with the press of a button whenever you want, then maybe that business model deserves a second look. All right, now let's take a look at the comments below Accursed Farm's video on this. That is, you know, Ross Scott's video response to the statement by Video Games Europe. The comments are like really interesting. We have Joe Cat saying the irony that they say this is the only way to ensure your online safety, while hackers are literally taking control of people's PCs in official COD servers. In case you hadn't heard of that, that's something that actually happened recently, which is pretty insane. Spack in here says if it hurts, it means it's working, and absolutely, because the thing is, they respond to this initiative, which means that they're actually taking it seriously now, because this might affect things a lot going forward, at least when it comes to like EU regulation. And as some of you may know already, whenever like a proposal goes through or laws get made in the EU, usually that follows through everywhere else in the world. So this is super important, and why this initiative needs to go through is that this will allow like lawmakers and people that are knowledgeable in creating laws to make laws and proposals that will actually help the consumer or be more consumer friendly. Also, in case you hadn't heard this, but Ubisoft actually updated their TOS just recently. The comment from Guillermo Santos here says Ubisoft now has a full section on their TOS about termination. They literally tell you to destroy all copies on your possession upon end of service, which is spineless. Actually, very true. That is also something they changed just recently. Like, they're actually responding to this and being scared because they realize that, oh shit, this might actually go through. There might be something here that consumers might be able to do to create a more consumer-friendly environment for gamers. And a lot of publishers just simply don't like that, because they want to be able to control what you do essentially with your game. They want to have full rights to whatever you do with your games. And that is why this, you know, games as a service has to, like, the entire thing has to be looked at, I feel, because we're moving so fast towards a anti-consumer society day by day. And that's not just when it comes to like game development, but all over the world. But especially this, initiative in particular is so important because this is the first real attempt at making gamers' voices heard. One comment to really bring this point home is by literally Vera, who says, if you didn't all know, Video Games Europe was the same trade association to aggressively lobby against the classification of loot boxes as gambling. Do you guys remember that whole debacle a couple of years ago? It was pretty strong whenever Battlefront 2 came out. That is Star Wars Battlefront 2. Oh my god, that was a huge thing. And I mean, this doesn't surprise me. I'd wager that a lot of people who read this statement from Video Games Europe were like, oh, so this is official. They're saying that no, we're not actually going to take a look at this seriously. But the funny thing is that this is a lobbying group. This is not like, you know, the EU Parliament or something like that that says, no, we're not going to take a look at this. This is literally just lobbying publishers that just want to move against this, essentially. This is the rival faction to gamers right now. So if you would imagine that this is like a battle or like a war between gamers and publishers, then Video Games Europe is quite literally the faction that we're standing against here. At least that's how I see it, because it is a lobbying group. In any case, this was a very interesting read. Do let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comments below. As always, I think this entire battle between consumers and publishers is very important, and I really hope that most of you in the EU has already like signed on the initiative. Again, if you haven't, make sure you do so. It's very important. And again, for anybody who's outside of the EU, do not sign this, because that will count as a spoof, and they will just remove it from the, you know, the voting or the signatures completely. So don't do anything if you're not from the EU. Only do it if you're from the EU. Again, talk to your friends. If you have any friends in the EU and you're from America, let them know. Spread the good word. We got to keep the signatures coming in here. This is very important for all of you gamers out there. This is not just simply for a subsection of gaming. This is for you, the consumer. So again, make sure you sign it. Talk to your friends, spread the word. But as always, guys, take care. This has been Mr. Holton, signing off.